I've always preferred buying things in person, but when I moved to my new apartment, I needed a couch. My budget was tight, so I turned to Craigslist. After a few days of searching, I found a listing for a beautiful, slightly used couch. The price was low, almost too good to be true. I should have known better, but I was excited. The ad was simple: couch for sale, excellent condition. Contact Rob. The picture showed a stylish, dark gray couch, perfect for my living room. I sent a message to Rob and quickly got a reply. He told me he was moving out of town and needed to get rid of the couch fast. We agreed to meet at his place the next evening. I arrived at the address Rob had given me, a small, run-down house on the outskirts of town. The neighborhood felt eerie, especially as the sun began to set. I parked my car and walked up to the front door. As I knocked, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. Rob opened the door. He was a tall, thin man with a scruffy beard and tired eyes. "You must be here for the couch," he said, his voice raspy. I nodded, and he stepped aside to let me in. The house was dark and smelled musty, like it hadn't been lived in for a while. Rob led me to the living room, where the couch was waiting. It looked just like the picture, maybe even better. I sat down and tested it out. It was comfortable, and I was sold. "I'll take it," I said, pulling out $50 from my wallet. Rob's eyes gleamed as he took the money. "Great," he said. "I'll help you load it into your car." As we struggled to carry the couch out the front door, I noticed something strange. The walls in the hallway were covered with newspaper clippings. They were all about local burglaries and home invasions. A chill ran down my spine. Why would someone have these all over their walls? Rob caught me staring, quickly said, "I'm a bit of a crime buff." I forced a smile and nodded, but my instincts were screaming at me to get out of there. We finally got the couch into my car, and I thanked Rob, eager to leave. As I drove home, I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was wrong. The entire experience felt surreal, and Rob's house kept popping back into my mind. A week later, I was sitting on my new couch watching TV when I heard a strange noise coming from the kitchen. My heart started racing. I lived alone and wasn't expecting anyone. I grabbed a baseball bat from my closet and quietly made my way to the kitchen. I flicked on the light, and there he was, Rob, rummaging through my drawers. He looked up, surprised and angry. "What are you doing here?" I shouted, tightening my grip on the bat. Rob smirked. "You made it too easy. I knew where you lived and I knew you'd be alone. I've been watching you. Fear coursed through me, but I tried to stay calm. Get out of my house now," I yelled, trying to sound braver than I felt. Rob took a step toward me, and I swung the bat, hitting him in the arm. He cursed and lunged at me, knocking me to the ground. We struggled, but I managed to kick him off and ran to my phone to call the police. I locked myself in the bathroom and waited, shaking with fear. I could hear Rob banging on the door, trying to get in. It felt like hours, but finally I heard the sound of sirens. The police burst in, and Rob tried to escape, but they tackled him to the ground and arrested him. The police later told me that Rob was a wanted thief. He would sell items online, learn about his buyers, and then rob their homes. I was lucky to be alive. They found evidence in his house linking him to several other crimes. The newspaper clippings were his trophies, reminders of his past burglaries. I was relieved that Rob was finally caught, but the experience left me shaken. I couldn't stop thinking about how close I came to being another one of his victims. I got rid of the couch, unable to look at it without feeling a wave of terror. From then on, I was more cautious about buying things online. I made sure to meet sellers in public places and never gave out my address. The whole ordeal taught me a valuable lesson about trust and safety. Even now, whenever I hear a strange noise at night, my mind goes back to that terrifying encounter. It's a reminder that danger can lurk in the most unexpected places, and sometimes a great deal isn't worth the risk. Story 2. The Intruder. It was a dark and quiet night. I was alone at home, sitting on the couch and watching TV. My husband was away on a business trip, and the kids stayed at their grandparents' house for the weekend. The house was unusually silent, and I found it peaceful yet eerie. I liked the calmness, but I couldn't shake off the feeling of unease. Every small noise made me jump. I decided to make myself some tea. The kitchen was dimly lit, and I could see shadows dancing on the walls. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, filling the silence with its steady rhythm. I boiled some water, made my tea, and went back to the living room. As I sat back down, I heard a strange sound coming from the window. It was a faint scratching noise, like something sharp scraping against the glass. My heart started to race. I tried to tell myself it was just a branch tapping against the window, but deep down, I knew it was something else. I stood up, and slowly walked towards the window. As I got closer, the scratching grew louder. I reached out with a trembling hand and pulled the curtain aside. There, I saw a shadowy figure standing outside. I froze in fear. The figure was tall and bulky, and I could barely make out his features in the dark. He was wearing a mask that covered his face, making him look even more terrifying. Before I could react, he smashed the window with a loud crash. Glass shattered everywhere, and I stumbled back, falling to the floor. The intruder climbed through the broken window and into my living room. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or scream. He looked around the room, his eyes scanning every corner. Then he spotted me lying on the floor. He walked towards me, and I could see the glint of a knife in his hand. "Don't move," he growled, his voice deep and menacing. I nodded, too scared to say anything. He grabbed my arm and pulled me to my feet. "Where's your money?" he demanded. I don't have much cash," I stammered, "but there's some in the drawer in the kitchen." He shoved me towards the kitchen, keeping a tight grip on my arm. I led him to the drawer where we kept some emergency cash. He yanked it open and grabbed the money, stuffing it into his pocket. Then he turned his attention to the rest of the house. "Where else do you keep your valuables?" he asked, his eyes narrowing. "In the bedroom," I whispered. "There's some jewelry on the bedside table." He dragged me upstairs to the bedroom. I pointed to the drawer, and he rifled through it, taking all the jewelry he could find. I felt a wave of helplessness wash over me as he ransacked my home. I didn't know what else he would take, or if he would hurt me. All I could do was hope and pray that he would leave soon. After what felt like an eternity, he seemed satisfied with his loot. He looked at me, his expression hidden behind the mask. "Stay here," he ordered. "Don't move until I'm gone." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. He turned and walked out of the bedroom, heading back downstairs. I heard him moving around, opening and closing drawers, and then the sound of the front door opening. I stayed still, too afraid to follow him. Minutes passed, and the house grew silent again. I finally mustered the courage to move. I crept downstairs, my heart pounding in my chest. The front door was wide open, and the intruder was gone. I quickly shut the door and locked it, my hands shaking. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, my voice trembling as I told the operator what had happened. They assured me that the police were on their way. I sat on the couch, hugging my knees to my chest, waiting for them to arrive. When the police got there, they asked me a lot of questions. I told them everything I could remember about the intruder. They took notes and looked around the house for evidence. I felt a little better knowing they were there, but I was still scared. A few days later, the police called me. They had found the intruder. He had been caught trying to sell the jewelry he stole from my house. The relief I felt was overwhelming. They told me he had a record and had been involved in several burglaries in the area. This time, though, he wouldn't be getting away. I still feel uneasy when I'm home alone, especially at night. The memory of that terrifying night is hard to forget, but I am grateful for the police and for the fact that the intruder was caught. Now, I always make sure to double-check the locks on all the doors and windows before I go to bed. I know that I can't let fear control my life, but I also know that being cautious is important. The world can be a scary place, and sometimes the only thing you can do is be prepared and stay safe. Story 3. The Unseen Presence. I moved into a new apartment last month. It was an old building, but it had charm, and I loved it. The first few nights were peaceful. I was still getting used to the creaks and groans of the place, but it felt like home. One night, though, things changed. I was lying in bed reading a book when I heard a soft whisper. At first I thought it was just the wind, but then I heard it again. It was a faint, unintelligible murmur coming from the living room. My heart started to race. I put down my book and listened carefully. The whispering continued, growing louder and more distinct. I couldn't make out the words, but it sounded like a conversation. I slowly got out of bed and tiptoed towards the living room. The whispers stopped as soon as I entered. The room was empty, but the air felt heavy, almost suffocating. I checked the windows and doors. They were all locked. I convinced myself it was just my imagination and went back to bed. The next night it happened again. This time, the whispers were louder and more urgent. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. I got up and walked to the living room. The whispers stopped once more. I was starting to feel unnerved. I decided to stay in the living room, hoping to catch whatever was making the noise. I sat on the couch, my eyes scanning the room. The clock ticked loudly, filling the silence. Then I felt it, a presence, like someone was standing right behind me. I turned around quickly, but there was no one there. The whispers started again, this time right next to my ear. I jumped up and backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. There was no answer, just the relentless whispering. I felt a cold breeze brush past me, even though the windows were closed. I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my bed, unable to sleep. The whispers became a nightly occurrence. They grew louder and more insistent, filling my apartment with an eerie, unsettling presence. I couldn't take it anymore. I decided to do some research about the building. I went to the local library and found old newspaper articles about my apartment. I discovered that a previous tenant had died under mysterious circumstances. There were rumors that the apartment was haunted. I was scared, but I needed to know more. I contacted a local paranormal investigator. He agreed to come to my apartment and check things out. The investigator arrived with his equipment and set up cameras and audio recorders. He stayed the night, monitoring the activity. The whispers started as usual, and the investigator listened carefully. He recorded the voices and played them back for me. The whispers were clearer on the recording, and I could hear the words, "Help me." The investigator explained that the spirit was trying to communicate with me. He performed a cleansing ritual to help the spirit move on. As he chanted and burned sage, the air in the apartment grew lighter, the whispers faded away, and the oppressive feeling lifted. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The investigator told me that the spirit had likely been trapped and was now free. I thanked him and hoped that the disturbances were over. Since then, my apartment has been peaceful. The whispers are gone, and I no longer feel the eerie presence. I'm grateful to the investigator for helping me. I've learned to appreciate the history of the building and respect the spirits that may still linger. It's a reminder that the past can sometimes leave its mark on the present, and we must be mindful of the unseen forces around us. Story 4. The Creepy Doll. I have always loved collecting antiques. There's something fascinating about the history and stories behind old objects. One day, I stumbled upon an antique shop in a small town I was visiting. The shop was filled with all sorts of treasures, from old furniture to vintage jewelry. As I browsed through the aisles, I saw it, a porcelain doll sitting on a dusty shelf. The doll was beautiful, with curly blonde hair, blue eyes, and a frilly dress. It looked old, and I felt an instant connection to it. I picked up the doll and examined it closely. There was something captivating about its lifelike features. The shop owner noticed my interest and approached me. "That's a special doll," he said. "It belonged to a little girl who lived in this town over a century ago. Some say it's haunted." I laughed, thinking he was just trying to add a bit of mystery to his sale. "Haunted? I said, raising an eyebrow. "Well, I'll take it." I brought the doll home and placed it on a shelf in my living room. That night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a soft thud coming from the living room. I went to check and found the doll lying on the floor. I thought it must have fallen off the shelf, so I picked it up and put it back. The next morning, I found the doll on the floor again, but this time it was in a different position, as if someone had moved it. I started to feel uneasy. Over the next few days, strange things began to happen. Objects would go missing, only to turn up in odd places. I would hear faint giggles and whispers when no one else was around. The doll seemed to move on its own, always ending up in different spots around the house. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just my imagination, but the occurrences became more frequent and disturbing. One night, I woke up to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. My heart raced as I listened, the footsteps getting closer to my bedroom. I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously opened the door. There, standing in the hallway, was the doll. It was upright, staring at me with its glassy blue eyes. I screamed and backed away, dropping my flashlight. The doll fell to the floor with a soft thud. I couldn't stay in the house any longer. I packed a bag and went to stay with a friend. I told her about the doll, and she suggested I get rid of it. The next day I returned home and took the doll to a nearby church. I explained the situation to the priest, and he agreed to take it. He said he would perform a blessing and keep it in the church to ensure it wouldn't cause any more trouble. After leaving the doll at the church, the strange occurrences stopped. My house felt normal again, and I was able to sleep peacefully. I was relieved to be rid of the doll, but the experience left me shaken. I still love antiques, but I'm much more cautious about what I bring into my home. The memory of that creepy doll serves as a reminder that some objects carry more than just history. They carry the remnants of their past owners, and sometimes those remnants can be dangerous. Story 5. The Ghostly Roommate. When I moved into my new apartment, I was excited about the fresh start. The place was spacious, affordable, and had a beautiful view of the city. I was ready to make it my own. The first few weeks were great. I decorated, settled in, and got to know my neighbors. But then strange things started to happen. It began with small, inexplicable noises, footsteps in the hallway when no one was there, doors creaking open on their own, and soft. I tried to brush it off as the building settling or my imagination playing tricks on me, but the incidents became more frequent and harder to ignore. One evening, I was watching TV when I heard a loud thud coming from the bedroom. I went to check and found my books scattered on the floor. They had fallen off the shelf, but there was no reason for them to have done so. I picked them up and put them back, feeling a bit uneasy. A few days later, I came home from work to find the living room in disarray. The couch cushions were on the floor, the coffee table was moved, and the TV remote was missing. It looked like someone had been in my apartment, but nothing was stolen. I double-checked the locks and called the landlord, who assured me that no one else had access to my unit. That night I heard the whispers again, louder this time. They seemed to be coming from the corner of the room. I turned on the light and saw a shadowy figure standing there. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. The figure was hazy and transparent, but I could make out the shape of a person. I blinked, and it was gone. I didn't sleep much that night. The next day I told my friend about the strange occurrences. She suggested I do some research on the building. I went to the library and looked up old records and newspapers. I discovered that a woman had died in my apartment several years ago. She had lived alone and was found dead under mysterious circumstances. There were rumors that her spirit still haunted the place. I was scared, but I didn't want to leave my apartment. I decided to try to communicate with the spirit. That night, I sat in the living room and spoke out loud. "I know you're here," I said. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just want to understand." There was no response, but the air felt heavy, as if the spirit was listening. Over the next few weeks, the activity continued, but it seemed less hostile. The whispers were softer and the disturbances less frequent. I started to feel a strange connection to the spirit, as if we were coexisting in the same space. I left small offerings, a flower, a piece of candy, a sign of respect. One night, I had a vivid dream. The woman who had died in the apartment appeared to me. She looked sad and lost. She didn't speak, but I felt her presence strongly. When I woke up, I knew I had to help her find peace. I contacted a local medium, who agreed to visit my apartment. The medium conducted a seance, calling upon the spirit to communicate. The air grew cold and the lights flickered. The medium spoke gently, asking the spirit to reveal its story. Through the medium, the spirit conveyed that she was trapped and couldn't move on. She was lonely and afraid. The medium performed a cleansing ritual, guiding the spirit towards the light. After the seance, the atmosphere in my apartment changed. It felt lighter, more peaceful. The disturbances stopped, and I no longer felt the eerie presence. I thanked the medium and hoped that the spirit had found the peace she needed. Living in that apartment taught me a lot about the unseen world and the importance of respecting the spirits that linger among us. I learned that sometimes we share our space with those who have unfinished business, and it's our duty to help them find their way. Story 6. The Ghostly Roommate. In 2003, I needed a roommate. Living alone in my small apartment was getting too expensive, so I decided to find someone to share the rent. I posted an ad on Craigslist, hoping to find someone nice and normal. A few days later, I got a response from a guy named John Williams. He seemed nice enough over email and needed a place to stay soon. We met up, and he looked normal, just an average guy in his late 20s. I thought this could work out. John moved in quickly, and at first everything seemed fine. We didn't see each other much because of our different schedules. I worked during the day, and he worked at night. We had short chats in the morning or late at night. He was polite and kept to himself. It was a good arrangement, or so I thought. After a few weeks, I started noticing some strange things. John was hardly ever home. Sometimes he would disappear for days without a word. When he did come back, he looked tired and nervous. I thought maybe he had a demanding job or some personal issues. I didn't want to pry, so I let it go. One day, I found my mail in the trash. I was confused and a little angry. Why would someone do that? I asked John if he had seen anyone near our mailbox, but he just shrugged and said no. His answer didn't satisfy me, but I had no proof he was involved. A few days later, I noticed John's bedroom door was always locked. This was odd because he never mentioned anything valuable in there. My curiosity grew stronger. One night, while he was out, I tried to peek into his room through the keyhole. I couldn't see much, just a dimly lit room and shadows moving. It gave me an eerie feeling. Then things got worse. I started hearing strange noises at night. Whispers, footsteps, and sometimes soft crying. I could never pinpoint where they were coming from, but they always seemed to be near John's room. I tried to ask him about it, but he always brushed it off, saying I was imagining things. One night, I was jolted awake by a loud bang. I jumped out of bed and ran to John's room. The door was slightly open, and I could see flickering candlelight inside. I pushed the door open and froze. The room was filled with old, dusty furniture and strange symbols painted on the walls. In the center of the room was a small altar with candles and an old book. John was standing there, chanting in a language I didn't understand. He looked up at me with wild eyes and shouted, "Get out! You shouldn't be here." Terrified, I backed out of the room. I didn't sleep that night, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The next day, I confronted John and demanded to know what was going on. He confessed that he was trying to communicate with the spirit of his deceased girlfriend. He believed she was trapped in our apartment and needed his help to move on. I was shocked and didn't know what to say. That evening, John packed his things and left. I was relieved, but also scared of what he might have left behind. The strange noises continued for a few more nights, but they gradually faded away. I never saw John again, but the memory of that eerie experience still haunts me.